I've come to the realization that a panorama shot isn't just for those epic landscapes. You can also use panorama mode on your phone for vertical shots too. Let's have a look. Now, we all know those panorama shots where you can squeeze so much of a landscape, 180 degrees or more, into a single shot. They look great. You can also do the same vertically as well to capture big, tall buildings or long roads. But they also work close up as well. I'm stood in front of this lamppost on this really quaint city street, and I'm going to use the panorama mode on my phone in vertical mode to try and capture a really interesting effect of reality warping around me. So I've got panorama mode open here on the phone, and what I can do on this phone is to select a wide-angled lens, which is just going to accentuate that warp effect even more. Now, so I'm positioned dead center to the lamppost. One of the things with a panorama that you really need to watch out for is exposure, and very often where you start off your shot is where the phone will expose to. But if you're starting on, say, the ground where it's relatively dark and then panoramaing up to the sky, it means that having had the exposure set to the ground, the sky will be blown out. And the opposite is true as well. So if I start my panorama on the sky, the phone's thinking, oh, this is a really light scene. By the time I swoop down to the ground, then everything down here is going to be dark and muddy. Neither of those are what we really want. So what we need to do is to try and select somewhere that's a halfway house between the two. Now, what I've noticed where I'm stood is that as well as the lamppost in front of me and the sky ahead of me, there's a tree right above me that I think is really going to help the effect, but also give my phone something to lock its exposure onto. So if I start all the way up here and then just tap the screen just there we go. So I've tapped on the green of the tree ahead of me, and I'm just going to follow the arrow down to the ground, and my expectation is just there, that the ground doesn't appear all dark, because the tree is a kind of halfway house between the darks and the lights, will have made things about right exposure wise. Let's try again. So just pointing right up, and it might be that I could be using one of the buildings to the side instead, but this tree works very handily. So making sure I'm dead center with this lamppost, just adjust my position a little bit. There we go. Tap on the tree, exposure set, tap on the shutter button, and then follow the arrow down to the ground. Not too fast, not too slow. Keep it nicely aligned. And then just as we get to the bottom of the lamppost, close the shutter just there. All right, so fingers crossed, I'm nicely aligned. Fingers crossed I've got the exposure right. And I hope that this kind of warping effect that I'm expecting with this panorama and the wide-angled lens are all going to come together to create a really interesting shot. Let's see. This is what can go wrong when you take a vertical panorama shot and don't correctly expose. For my money, what I've done here is that I've started off on the ground, which is why the pavement here is nicely exposed. Maybe I've been a bit too generous with the framing of my feet here. But as soon as we go upwards with the panorama, just look at the sky. It's this big overblown mush of white. There's no detail in the clouds. We almost lose the tops of the building in places as well. So nice idea, but the framing could be improved and the exposure can certainly be improved to make the most of the sky. Here is the other extreme of exposure with a vertical panorama. It looks to me as though I've started this shot in the sky because I can see some bits of detail. I can see the clouds, maybe a little bit of blue in there. But as soon as I've gone down with my camera to pavement level, that's when it all starts to go a little bit wrong. The point of interest, this lamppost, is very silhouetted, and by the time I get to pavement level itself, I really can't make out very much at all. So another example of when exposure goes wrong. Oh, there's so much to like about this image. I'm really excited to see it come out. So with this vertical panorama shot here, the exposure is great. I can see everything that's happening at pavement level. The sky has got plenty of detail too. So that's kind of one tick in the box. Now, because I started just kind of over my head, I'm able to get this tree that was really sort of behind me, over me, but it appears as though it's peeking out the top of the frame here. And this leads us to another thing with regards to the composition of the vertical panorama shots, particularly when using the wide-angled lens. You get this warping of reality, warping of perspective. See how these buildings kind of bend down towards the middle of the frame with this sort of funnel effect. The gap in the buildings just above my head creates this horizontal line. It's almost like a cross leading me in there. It feels as though reality is warping in around me. And that, as well as the great exposure, the nicely aligned composition as well, it's exactly what I wanted to try and create with this panorama. Remember, they are not just for landscapes. You can create some great intimate cityscapes with them as well.